The hum of the city never stopped. Even at 3 a.m., lights blinked like artificial stars across glass towers, and traffic whispered in distant pulses. Alexander Rowe stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse suite, watching the glow of his empire beneath him. Somewhere below, people celebrated deals, drank away disappointment, or lived lives simpler than his own. Behind him, champagne fizzed in untouched flutes. A woman he barely knew slept on a white leather couch, the aftermath of yet another corporate gala, her laughter now reduced to soft breaths. Alexander's reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, a tailored suit, sharp features, a man who had it all and yet felt nothing. He turned away. The next morning, without telling anyone, Alexander packed a small bag, traded his sleek black Maybach for a dusty pickup from his garage collection, and drove. He didn't set a destination. He just kept going, past suburbs, past farms, past everything he knew, until the highways thinned and the buildings gave way to trees, hills, and the unfiltered scent of earth. By late afternoon, he found himself in a place he couldn't name. The road narrowed into a dirt path, and then he saw it, a hand-painted wooden sign nailed to a crooked post. Welcome to Eldon Grove. A village, no more than 30 homes, surrounded by rolling fields of wild sunflowers and groves of fruit trees. Children ran barefoot down the road, waving at him with curious smiles. He pulled over near a small wooden stall decorated with woven baskets and bundles of fresh flowers. A young woman sat cross-legged beside it, humming to herself as she tied lavender stems with twine. Her clothes were simple, a faded blue dress and an apron smudged with earth. Her hair was dark and tied loosely, strands falling across her sun-kissed face. She looked up, startled by the unfamiliar vehicle. "You lost, city man?" she asked with a lopsided grin. Alexander smiled for the first time in weeks. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just found something worth stopping for." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by charm. "Well, if it's flowers you're after, these are fresh. The baskets are handmade. No discounts, though." He stepped out of the truck, dust clouding around his shoes. "No discounts needed." She handed him a bouquet. "Then welcome to Eldon Grove, stranger. I'm Lena." He took the flowers, their scent stronger than anything from his penthouse florist. He didn't know why, but something about this moment felt like the beginning of a story he hadn't dared to write. "I'm Alex," he said, deliberately leaving off the last name. And just like that, Alexander Rowe, billionaire, power broker, and heir to an empire, vanished for a while, and in his place stood a man discovering what it meant to be human again. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting golden light across the village like warm silk. The dirt road shimmered with heat, and birds sang from the trees with a kind of lazy confidence that only came in places where time moved slower. Alexander sat on an old wooden bench beside Lena's stall, the bouquet still in his hands. He wasn't sure what to do with it, no assistant to hand it to, no penthouse vase to display it in. It felt strange, holding something made by someone's hands instead of ordered online and delivered in sterile wrapping. Lena arranged the remaining flowers with careful precision, brushing leaves aside with fingers both delicate and worn from work. She glanced at him now and then, clearly amused that he hadn't moved along. "So, Alex, just passing through?" she asked, tying a ribbon around another bouquet. He considered lying, crafting a story about road trips or getting away from it all. But something about Lena made him want to tell the truth, or at least part of it. "I guess I needed a break. Too much noise in the city." She chuckled. "You must be from a big one, then. We don't get many outsiders out here. Just farmers, chickens, and gossip." Alexander smiled. "Sounds like heaven." "Maybe. Or maybe you'll be bored out of your mind by morning." "I don't think so," he said quietly. That made her pause. She looked at him more carefully now, not with suspicion, but curiosity. "Well, there's a room above old Mr. Harlan's shop if you're staying. Nothing fancy. Cold water, one window, and a squeaky bed. It'll do." She wiped her hands on her apron and nodded toward the far end of the road. Big red door. Can't miss it. And tell him Lena sent you, he owes me for a broken basket. As Alexander stood to go, he glanced again at the sunflowers swaying behind her. The wind carried their scent, earthy and sweet. Lena caught him looking and laughed softly. They're wild. Just grew that way. No one planted them. He nodded. Sometimes the best things do. She didn't reply, but her smile lingered long after he walked away. Later that night the room above Mr. Harlan's shop creaked with every step. The bed did squeak. The walls were thin, and the night was filled with the croak of frogs and distant dog barks. But Alexander slept better than he had in months. He dreamed of golden fields and hands that smelled of lavender. By the time the rooster crowed, Alexander was already awake. There was no espresso machine, no sleek marble bathroom or morning emails to check. Just the sound of roosters, the smell of bread baking somewhere nearby, and sunlight creeping through a sheer curtain like a whisper. He dressed simply, jeans, a plain gray shirt, and boots he'd never worn before that now bore a fine layer of dust. He walked into the village as it stirred to life, feeling both foreign and oddly invisible. For once, no one pointed at him, asked for photos, or begged for deals. Outside Lena's stall, she was already setting up. A straw hat shielded her face from the sun, but her familiar voice floated over the flower stems and baskets. Back already, city man? I told you, Alexander said, stepping closer, I'm not just passing through. Lena smirked. We'll see. Most men like you don't last a week out here. He raised an eyebrow. Men like me? Soft hands. Clean boots. Look like you've never chopped wood or carried water before. Guilty, he admitted. But I'm a quick learner. She tossed him a knife and pointed to a pile of thorny stems. Prove it. Trim these. Don't cut yourself. He sat beside her, awkward at first, his fingers fumbling with stems and twine. She didn't help, didn't hover. She just watched out of the corner of her eye, amused. They worked in silence for a while, the kind that feels full rather than empty. Birds chirped. A donkey brayed somewhere in the distance. It was a rhythm he hadn't known he needed. Finally, she broke the quiet. So, what do you actually do in the city? He paused. I manage a company. She nodded slowly. Must be a big one. You've got the look. What look is that? The kind of man who's always got somewhere more important to be. That hit harder than he expected. He looked at her, hands covered in green and earth, face smudged with sweat and light. She was fully present. She belonged here, while he still felt like he was pretending. Maybe that's why I came, he said. To be somewhere that didn't need me to be important. Lena glanced sideways at him, thoughtful. Well, this place doesn't need suits and money. But we always need an extra hand in the garden. He smiled. Then I'm hired? She gave a mock sigh. We'll start with flower trimming. If you don't run off screaming, I'll let you plant something. Later that day Alexander stayed through lunch, eating warm bread and goat cheese Lena shared with him under the shade of a mango tree. She told him stories about her mother, about losing her father young, and growing up in the same cottage her grandfather built. He listened more than he spoke. And when she laughed, really laughed, it felt like something inside him unlocked. That night, as he lay in the squeaky bed again, Alexander realized something strange. He hadn't thought about the city all day. Back in the glass towers of the city, the absence of Alexander Rowe had not gone unnoticed. Meetings were rescheduled, investors whispered, and the board of Rowe International grew restless. His sister, Victoria Rowe, sharp-eyed and equally ambitious, was fielding more calls than she cared to. Though she admired her brother, she also knew the machine they'd built didn't run on silence. When his executive assistant, Milo, finally tracked down Alexander's location through a vague GPS ping and a network of desperate calls, Victoria was the first to act. She stared at the red dot blinking somewhere near a place called Eldon Grove and sighed. Of all the places, she muttered, already dialing. Back in Elden Grove it had been a week since Alexander arrived, and by now, everyone in the village knew him by name, or at least as Lena's visitor. He helped carry buckets from the well, attempted to milk a goat, and had grown surprisingly attached to Lena's garden. His city-trained hands were clumsy at first, but Lena was patient. She taught him how to tell ripe tomatoes from the stubborn green ones, how to plant basil and rose, and how to watch the sky for signs of rain. She never asked why he stayed. He never asked her if he could. One afternoon, while they sat on the porch of her cottage drinking ginger tea, her hand brushed his. She didn't pull away. The silence that followed was full of meaning. "I never imagined," he said, "that I could find something so real, so grounded. Out here." "You mean outside the suits and skyscrapers?" she teased, though her voice was gentle. "I mean outside. Everything I thought I needed to be happy." Lena's eyes softened. "You don't need to impress anyone here, Alex. We only care if you're kind. If you show up. If you dig when we dig." He smiled. "That, I can do." But just as he leaned closer, drawn not by obligation or attraction, but something deeper, his phone buzzed violently on the table. He froze. So did she. It was a number he couldn't ignore. Reluctantly, he answered. "Alex," Victoria's voice was cold but composed. "You've been gone 10 days. The board's panicking. There's a deal on the table worth $60 million. We can't stall any longer." Alexander glanced at Lena. She was staring out at the hills, her expression unreadable. "I told you, I needed time," he said. "You've had it," she snapped. "Now you need to come back before this fairy tale turns into a scandal. People are asking questions." He didn't respond. Victoria's voice lowered. "Are you really going to throw it all away for a village girl with dirt on her hands?" That stung. He hung up. When he looked back at Lena, she was already standing, gathering the mugs. Her back was turned, but her voice was steady. "Looks like the city's calling." Alexander stood slowly. "I didn't mean for this to happen. This place, it matters to me." She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Then you need to figure out what matters more." And with that, she walked inside, leaving Alexander on the porch, torn between two worlds, one he was born into, and one he never knew he needed. Elden Grove was a quiet place, but news had a strange way of traveling faster than a summer storm. It started with Mr. Harlan, who mentioned to his niece that Alexander had received a call on a phone fancier than anything he'd ever seen. Then old Mabel at the bakery chimed in, "He speaks too clean for a farm boy." And when Lena started turning down friendly suggestions to meet local suitors, the whispers grew into full-blown speculation. "Maybe he's a government inspector," one woman said. "Or hiding from something," another added. "No," said the village mechanic knowingly. "He's rich. You can see it in how he walks, like the world owes him nothing but space." Lena ignored them at first. But gossip had teeth, and by the week's end, even her own aunt confronted her as she gathered herbs behind the cottage. "You think this man is going to stay?" she asked, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Men like that don't marry girls like you, Lena. They marry socialites with money and names. You'll be left here, heart split like dried bark." Lena stood up straight, jaw tight. "He's different." Her aunt scoffed. "That's what they all say, before they leave with dust on their tires and promises in the wind." That evening Alexander sat beneath the mango tree, staring at the rows of basil he'd planted earlier that week. The garden was starting to look less wild. Neater. More like home. But Lena hadn't spoken much to him since the call. She was polite, but quieter. Guarded. He couldn't blame her. He'd built a life in another world, one with skyscrapers, headlines, and pressure. He knew it wouldn't be long before the truth reached everyone here. Maybe it already had. As if summoned by thought, Lena joined him, sitting a few feet away. "Is it true," she asked softly, "that you're rich?" That you're important in the city? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. She said nothing for a moment. Just stared ahead, toward the hills where the sun was dipping. So why come here? Because I was drowning, he said. Because no one in my world looked at me like I was a person. And because the day I met you, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. She turned to him, eyes full of hurt and wonder. You lied to me. I didn't lie, he said gently. I just left out the part one thought would ruin this. And now it's ruining us anyway. He reached for her hand, but she didn't move. I want to stay, Lena. I want to be with you. But you have an empire, she whispered. What are you going to do? Trade it for tomatoes and flower baskets? Alexander swallowed. Maybe I will. She looked away, eyes glistening. You have to choose, she said. Not just for me, for yourself. Are you a man running from the world, or a man ready to build a new one? Her words echoed in his chest like a bell toll. He didn't have an answer yet. And she didn't wait for one. As the sun set, she stood and walked back toward the cottage, leaving him alone beneath the tree, with nothing but the sound of wind rustling through leaves and the taste of a choice he wasn't ready to make. The next morning, the garden felt different. The air, usually soft with dew and birdsong, hung thick with silence. Even the bees, it seemed, buzzed more cautiously. Lena was already in the back, watering the rows of spinach and trimming dead leaves from the vines. Her shoulders were tense, her back straight, but there was a sadness in the way her hands moved, mechanical, not mindful. Alexander stood by the porch for a long time before walking to her. Lena, he said. She didn't turn. I'm busy. I know. But we need to talk. A pause. Then she set the watering can down and faced him, arms crossed. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of things unsaid. I don't want to be another secret, she said. You're not. You're the only real thing in my life right now. She held his gaze, waiting. So, he told her everything. He told her about the company, Row International, the legacy, the expectations. About growing up surrounded by privilege and pressure, about losing his parents young and inheriting more responsibility than love. About being groomed to lead, to conquer, to win, but never to feel. He told her about the endless boardrooms, the hollow parties, the forced smiles. And how, one day, he realized he couldn't breathe. And then I found this place, he said. I found you. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing. Lena sat on a wooden crate, silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. You should have told me sooner. I was afraid. Of what? That I'd see you differently? He nodded. That you'd think this was just a game. That I came here to play farmer for a few weeks before going back to my high-rise life. And isn't that what you're going to do? She asked, eyes narrowing. Go back to your real world? No, he said without hesitation. Not unless you come with me. She blinked, startled. Come with you? To a world I don't belong in? Where I'd be the poor village girl who didn't know how to dress or speak your language. I don't care what they think, he said. I care about you. Lena stood, stepping back. You say that now. But your life isn't here, Alex. You were raised to rule cities. I was raised to grow gardens. We don't belong to the same story. He stepped toward her. Then let's write a new one. She looked at him, really looked. And for a moment, he thought she might say yes. But instead, she whispered, you need to go. Figure out what story you're truly willing to live in. And if it still includes me. Then come back. But come back ready. Then she turned and walked away, into the rows of sunflowers now bending in the wind, leaving Alexander standing in the soil with his heart half buried. The city hit him like a cold slap. The moment Alexander returned, he was swallowed by sound, steel, and expectation. The glass doors of Row International opened with an automatic hush, and the scent of expensive cologne and floor polish filled his lungs. Executives clapped him on the back. Board members smiled too wide. His sister, Victoria, greeted him with a single raised eyebrow. "You look like you just came back from war," she remarked, eyeing his suntanned skin and worn boots. "Maybe I did," he said flatly. She handed him a tablet. "There's a press conference tomorrow. We've contained the rumors." "Barely. The acquisition deal is back on the table, and investors need reassurance." Alexander stared at the screen, but none of it registered. He went through the motions. Meetings. Signatures. Smiling for the cameras. But everything about this world, his world, felt too polished, too hollow. That night, he stood alone on the balcony of his penthouse, 35 floors above the city lights. Below him, cars blinked in endless streams. Screens flashed headlines and stock prices. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter hummed like a mosquito in the dark. He looked down at his hands. Clean. Soft again. No dirt beneath his nails, no scent of basil, no scratches from rose thorns. He hated it. He thought of Lena's hands, rough, capable, honest. He thought of her voice, her eyes, her silence when she was thinking, and the way she smiled without knowing it. He hadn't felt peace since the moment he left Eldon Grove. That night, he sat at his desk and began writing. Not contracts. Not speeches. A letter. Dear Lena, I thought leaving would help me find clarity. But all it did was show me what I lost. I've spent years surrounded by everything, money, power, praise, but I've never felt more empty than I do here. You once asked me what kind of man I was, one running from the world or one ready to build a new one. Now I know. I want to build something that lasts. Not towers. Not empires. A life. With you. If you'll still have me, I'm coming back. Not as the man I was, but as the man I choose to be. Alex. The next morning, he handed the company reins over to Victoria, who looked at him like he'd grown a second head. You're walking away? I'm walking toward something better. And with nothing but a worn duffel bag and a heart beating fast in his chest, Alexander left the city behind, again. But this time, it wasn't an escape. It was a return. The road back to Eldon Grove was a blur of endless highways and twisting country roads. Alexander's fingers gripped the steering wheel, the weight of his decision settling with each mile his phone was off, the world outside the village fading into oblivion. He had no idea what he would find when he arrived. Lena might have moved on. She might have found someone else, someone who didn't carry the weight of a corporate empire on his shoulders, someone who didn't run away when things got real. But he couldn't go back to the life he'd known. Not now. Not after what he had learned in that garden, surrounded by dirt and sunlight, with the woman who showed him that there was more to life than power and prestige. Eldon Grove. When Alexander reached the familiar hand-painted sign, "Welcome to Eldon Grove," he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wasn't quite sure what he was expecting, but there was something in the air that made him feel home. The village hadn't changed. The same wild sunflowers dotted the landscape, and the same barefoot children played in the dirt. But something was different in the way the world felt now. It was as if he was seeing everything for the first time. The simplicity of it. The warmth. The authenticity. He drove toward Lena's cottage, his heart pounding, his palms sweaty. He parked in front, but the place felt empty. No sign of her. No laughter. No sounds of her soft humming in the garden. For a moment, panic gripped him. Had he missed her? Had she already left? He stood there for a long moment, taking in the cottage, the faded blue shutters, the small porch swing in the breeze. Then, from behind him, he heard the sound of footsteps. Turning, he saw Lena walking toward him, her hair loose and flowing in the wind, wearing a faded dress and a smile that made his chest tighten. She stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. Her eyes scanned him, taking in the worn jeans, the dust on his boots, the earnestness in his face. "So, you came back," she said, voice quiet but filled with a strange mix of disbelief and hope. "I did," Alexander said, his voice steady but unsure. "I'm here. For real this time." Lena took a slow step forward, her eyes not leaving his. The silence between them was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. "You could have stayed," she said softly, "and kept pretending you didn't have everything. You could have had the world and never known what it meant to truly live." "I didn't want the world anymore," he said, his voice low. "I wanted this. With you." She didn't speak right away, but her gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. The scent of lavender and fresh herbs hung in the air, reminding him of everything he had left behind and everything he had come to find. "I didn't expect you to come back," she said. "I thought you'd forget about me. About this place." "I haven't," he replied, his voice breaking with honesty. "I couldn't forget. You were right. I was running. But I don't want to run anymore, Lena. I want to build something here, with you. If you'll have me." For a long moment, Lena was silent, watching him carefully. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand brushing against his. "You're here now," she said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "And that's all that matters." A rush of relief flooded through him as he stepped closer, their hands meeting, the warmth of their connection wrapping around them like the summer sun. There was no grand gesture, no need for words to fill the space between them. Just the quiet understanding that, in that moment, they were exactly where they were meant to be. As they stood together, the wind gently sweeping through the fields of sunflowers, Alexander realized something profound. Life wasn't about what you built. It was about what you nurtured. And, for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was finally ready to nurture something real. Days turned into weeks, and as the sun rose each morning, Alexander found himself settling more comfortably into the rhythm of village life. The world that had once seemed so vast, so demanding, now felt small, but in the best way possible. The pace was slow, the hours long but filled with meaning. Mornings were spent alongside Lena in the garden, planting, pruning, and harvesting. Alexander learned how to properly pick tomatoes, how to protect the lavender from pests, and how to make a perfect pot of chamomile tea. Each task grounded him, reminding him that there was more to life than chasing after an elusive definition of success. And every evening, as they sat on the porch with their feet dangling off the edge, Lena would talk to him about her life, the stories of her childhood, her dreams for the future, and the lessons her grandmother had passed down through the generations. Alexander listened, captivated, understanding for the first time what it truly meant to be present. In return, he shared more than he had ever shared before, the lonely years spent building an empire, the masks he wore, and the hollowness he'd felt even at the peak of his success. It felt strange to admit it, but it also felt freeing. Here, with Lena, he didn't have to pretend to be someone he wasn't. One evening, as they worked side by side in the garden, Lena paused, wiping sweat from her brow and looking at him with a curious smile. "You're a different man than the one who first showed up here," she said, her voice gentle but knowing. Alexander stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "I'm trying to be." "Trying?" She raised an eyebrow. He smiled, leaning against the wooden fence. "I'm still figuring it out. But for the first time, I think I'm on the right path." Lena nodded, her expression softening. "The right path isn't always the easiest one." "No. But it's the one I choose," he said, meeting her gaze with quiet certainty. She stepped closer, and for a moment, their hands brushed. The connection was familiar, comfortable, but also full of possibility. He realized that there was still so much to discover about the world, about themselves, and about what their future together could be. The village festival a few weeks later, the village was bustling with excitement. The annual harvest festival was approaching, a time for the community to come together, celebrate the year's crops, and share food, music, and stories. It was a tradition that went back generations. Lena had invited Alexander to help set up the stalls, but he was beginning to realize that there was something more to it than just arranging tables and decorations. The festival was a celebration of family, of roots, and of the land that sustained them all. As he worked alongside the villagers, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He no longer saw the world as something to conquer, but as something to be a part of, something to nurture, just like the garden. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills and lanterns were lit, Lena took his hand, leading him through the crowd. They joined the others around the bonfire, where the laughter of children and the soft hum of music filled the air. "I'm glad you came back," Lena said, her voice soft. "I'm glad you let me," Alexander replied, his smile full of warmth. "I don't think I could have built anything that mattered without you." Lena looked at him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "You've built something more important than you realize. You built a life." And as the fire crackled and the music swelled, Alexander realized that this moment, this place, this love, was everything he'd been searching for all along. Epilogue. Roots. In the soil months passed, and life in Elden Grove continued to unfold. Alexander and Lena became partners, not just in the garden, but in everything that life had to offer. Together, they worked side by side, cultivating the land and their relationship. Though the world outside the village continued to turn, Alexander no longer felt the pull of the city. The business world, the suits, the boardrooms, they all felt distant now, like a dream he had once lived but no longer needed. He had found something far more precious in the simplicity of Elden Grove, the kind of peace that money couldn't buy and success couldn't define. And as he looked out over the fields, his hands in the earth, he knew one thing for certain: the future was as bright and full of possibility as the sunflowers that swayed in the summer breeze. In the garden between them, where love had taken root, they had built something real. Something lasting. Something that would grow stronger with each passing season. Kindly subscribe for more stories.